The stage they are, especially my children, what the stage they are, they need a proper teacher, a proper guidance, a proper way to be taught so that they can understand what they has lagged behind from the last 2 years.
People have not been vaccinated, especially children, so they can be vulnerable if schools open.
Parents will have to trust the teachers. Parents will have to trust the organization.
Online education was great, but it's been 2 years that we are doing it, and I don't think it is serving its whole purpose now. And kids are missing out on the learning, on interacting with their teachers.
It's a catch-22 situation because kids are already exposed because of parents who have to go out for work, because of other people who come in.
I miss going to school, but not for the reasons that seem obvious. I miss the memories and having people around.
The scare is there, the preventions are there, but vaccines have come out. People have started going out, and to be very fair, children are going out everywhere. They are only not going at school. They're going to movies, they're going for holidays, they're going to restaurants, malls, all the places. So I don't understand, how will not going to school help them or protect them in any way?
You heard from teachers, parents, and most importantly, children talking about what possibly has been the worst fallout of this pandemic. Children have been out of school for months together. In many cases, children have not seen school in the last 2 years. While countries all over the world plan their lives around the pandemic in such a way to open schools first and close them last, India unfortunately did the exact opposite.
You've got a young daughter, I've got a young daughter. We're parents, and I know we speak for millions of kids and parents across the country, Sneha, when I say that this is no longer just a demand. This has become a roar across India from parents and children to open schools now. And it's not an unreasonable demand. There were concerns earlier, but now it's backed by scientific fact and evidence.
This is area of triangle. What will be the area of triangle? Formula of area of triangle?
For almost 2 years now, schools across India have been shut.
In the capital, the government has again delayed the reopening of schools further. But health experts bat for reopening of schools.
Children who are at risk of getting a severe disease, which is a minuscule number, should be the focus, and they should be vaccinated first. And the opening up of schools should be allowed in a staggered manner. This is going to prevent us from the pandemic of obesity.
Parents and teachers are divided, especially when it comes to unvaccinated kids being sent to school.
Coming back to school is very, very vital and important, and I think some studies are showing that it's going to do a longer damage if students don't join school.
I don't think it is serving its whole purpose now. And kids are missing out on the learning, on interacting with their teachers, and not even the bigger kids. I think my daughter, who is just 7 years old, is also missing her teachers a lot.
There should be a wait and watch policy till the time the children aged 15 to 18 to get vaccinated.
In some states, there's a demand to reopen school with 50% strength. Many parents are finding it difficult to juggle jobs while taking care of children at home.
Managing your house is a completely tremendous work itself. Along with them handling their education, there is not just the education factor, but the responsibility, whether they are able to grasp the things they are being taught at this age, is also a very, very responsible work.
Others are wondering why kids are unsafe only in schools and safe everywhere else.
Children are going out everywhere. They are only not going at school. They're going to movies, they're going for holidays, they're going to restaurants, malls, all the places. So I don't understand, how will not going to school help them or protect them in any way?
Educationists say children have suffered enough.
Everything starts from discipline. When children are at home, they don't have a fixed routine. Children are not getting up early. They are not following a proper, particular schedule, which as a children, they need to follow for their mental, social development.
That one must learn to fight with this situation, because if we are not at all going to prepare our upcoming generation, because it is a sort of war-like situation. We have to make them ready to face these sort of things. Vaccination is already there. Vaccine has been introduced for the students, and they must be sent to the school now.
Students also want to return to schools.
Because of this online classes, mobile slide, it can affect our eyes. Returning will school will help me so better. And I'm missing my teachers also.
We cannot just focus on online classes. The study requires some another sort of environment, like we have to focus very much. I strongly agree with the offline classes.
Across the United States and parts of Europe, despite devastating COVID waves, schools remained open. It's time perhaps in India too, our kids go back to school. Bureau Report, India Today.
Want to start off with the very unsettling findings in a Boston Consulting Group report on the perils of online education. Did you know, for instance, ladies and gentlemen, that between 40 and 70% of children in this country don't have access to the devices that they need for their online classes? Did you, for instance, also know that over 70% of India's rural population simply doesn't have internet at home, so they're completely excluded from the online class experience? A shocking number, 80% of teachers say they are unable to maintain an emotional connect with their students. It's not just about taking classes, it's also about the emotional well-being of students. They feel a sense of isolation, and this has especially affected the young children. They may not know it yet, but the effects of it will be known later. Isolation, alienation, unable to connect socially, and their emotional growth all being impacted. 80% of teachers saying that it has been hampered. 90% of teachers, an even more shocking number, say they are struggling to actually assess their students online. It's been nearly 2 years now, but that assessment model still hasn't fallen into place. 90% of teachers say they cannot assess students online. And who is suffering more than the children and their parents as a result of school closure? We want to ask the first questions on this special show to the kids themselves, because they're the ones in the spotlight. They're the ones who are on notice as a result of this. Joining us live is Ishanvi. She's a class 2 student. She joins us live from Mumbai. Welcome, Ishanvi. We also have Nikhil Dabas, who is a student who has made this difficult switch during the pandemic from middle school to high school. We're going to talk to them both. Welcome to the both of you. Ishanvi, to you first. What has been the most difficult thing for you, having to spend the last couple of years almost only attending online classes? What do you miss the most? What has been most difficult for you?
The thing that has been most difficult is the internet. If the internet isn't working, then you can't log in. If you can't hear the teacher, you can't understand anything. So then you may have to miss the class. So that is the most difficult thing in online school.
And what do you miss the most, Ishanvi? Because you don't get to see your friends on an everyday basis. You have to get used to sitting in front of a laptop or a phone. What do you miss the most?
There are so many things that I miss. The school bus, and I miss playing with my friends in the park that they have in school. And I miss going to school and sitting inside the classroom and learning, and not sitting at home and learning. I miss seeing the teacher's face in school. There are so many things that I miss.
And that has...
And also, there are so many classes that are there, online and offline. But you can understand the teacher better in offline and not that well in online, but still you can understand her very well.
And I think Ishanvi, you speak for millions of students of your age and a little older, Sneha,
Yes,
who face exactly the same thing.
That's right, Shiv. Nikhil is from Delhi, and Nikhil, Delhi government has still not made up its mind really on whether schools should be opened up or not. If you were told, Nikhil, I want to know from you, that schools are going to be closed for a couple of more weeks, how would you really feel about it?
Right. So, first of all, I don't understand why schools are not being open. The fact that I can go to a wedding with 50% capacity, which is about 200 people, and not go to school with 20 of my classmates taking precautions, I think it's completely unnecessary. And I am sort of now fed up of this online and the government just delaying what is to come. And that is, and I think schools reopening is inevitable. And I think it's the best time to do it right now.
Nikhil, you've had an especially difficult situation because you've moved from class 8, if I'm not mistaken, to class 10. So from middle school to a crucial board year, where you haven't been able to interact with your teachers. That transition is seen as extremely crucial because it's formative and you're entering the competitive space. What has been the most difficult part of that transition?
So, firstly, I think my most sort of the most difficult part of that transition has been the loss of motivation, right? When you're in school, you're in that environment of work. You see your friends studying while you're doing nothing, and you want to study. But I'm a person who is competitive, and I take pride in my work, and I want to find out meaning in what work is, right? And so I think that is just gone. It's just the same cycle of getting up at 7, attending your classes, not really doing anything about it, right? And in like it's I haven't taken a single note for 2 years now because for me now what school is that 2 weeks before an exam I study, right? I don't really study half of the time because I don't need to, because there are recordings that have been posted, and I can argue the fact that I really need to attend classes as well. So it has been difficult, and especially for me now in the 10th, I've gone through 2 cycles of unit tests. I have gone through a pre-board and a board, and I've been bombarded with assignments, and I just don't feel like doing them because I am in a comfortable space. I'm at my house. I'm in my room the whole day, and so I've just completely lost all motivation to do work. And I think it's time to get out of that cycle. It's time to get out into the real world and get out of my comfort zone.
And I'm sure, Sneha, that Ishanvi would be facing exactly the same thing. The sense of being fed up. Please let us out and go back to school.
Absolutely. Shanti, I want to ask you that. Initially, in fact, nobody knew that schools are going to be closed for 2 long years. What would you now tell those people who are taking this decision when you are the most important stakeholder that schools should be shut for some more time? What would you want to tell those people, Ishanvi?
I would say that if you feel like it's supposed to be closed, then wait. Wait for it to settle down a little more. Wait for it to settle down more, and then once there are less amount of cases, then think about opening schools, and don't keep it closed for too long, like 2 years, and maybe extend it to 3, because then it becomes too difficult to learn. Too much in online.
I know for a fact that both Nikhil and Ishanvi, they represent millions of students across the country. We feel the hardship that you have faced along with your parents. In cities, in towns and villages, the experience has been different, but there is one common factor, that kids want to get back to their schools and parents want to push them as well. So I thank you, Nikhil, and I thank you, Ishanvi. We here are going to pile the pressure as well. Sneha and I have promised our viewers that this is going to be the first of many such shows until the schools are finally open. So we thank the both of you for being with us.
That's right. Shanvi, Nikhil, in fact, I'm going to request you both to continue to be with us. We'll carry on this conversation further. The last 2 years have been extremely tough for children. Instead of being in school with their teachers and with their friends, children have been in front of their laptops and computers. What's more than 70% of children in India have not even had the privilege of online education. The last 2 years have just exposed the big digital divide that is a reality in India.
A common sight in most Indian households. Kids studying at home, cooped up in their rooms, talking to a laptop. The younger ones not knowing what it's like to be in a school. For 30% of kids in India, remote learning is a part of their lives. For the rest 70%, the pandemic has meant no access to education. India has now had pandemic-driven school closures for 2 years. Schools were mostly shut from March 2020 till year-end. 2021 saw small phases of opening. In 2021, while secondary schools were open for 40 to 50% of the time, elementary schools have mostly remained shut for many states in India. The Boston Consultancy Group says online education is yet to reach 70% of kids in India. It says that schools were shut globally in 2020 first half, but most countries prioritized opening of schools over opening of gyms and malls. Australia, Japan, US, South Africa and the UK opened schools 70 to 90% time of the year. In spite of having higher disease incidence as compared to India, these countries chose not to close down schools throughout. UNESCO's global date sheet on the duration of school closures, which has data on the number of weeks of full and partial closure in every country between March 2020 and October 21, 2021, schools were closed in Uganda for 23 weeks. Till then, India follows with 82 weeks of closure.
Top-ranked Uganda actually opened schools earlier in January, so I think India will soon be rank 1. And the government's approach here just seems to be to indefinitely extend the longest, one of the longest school closures in the world.
Prolonged school closures have serious implications extending beyond learning, increased child exploitation, lower nutrition with constrained midday meals, social and emotional issues.
Because every child will have to get an infection to get immunity unless he gets or she gets immunized. And hence, when parents send their school to children, I think they should expect that there will be some amount of cough and cold. The child was in cough and cold, the parents are requested not to send the child to school.
It is a place where a child learns how to interact, how to play, how to cooperate, negotiate, make friends and learn many other micro skills. These are essential for the learning and holistic development of our children.
Doctors also say clinically, the disease manifests in a way that doesn't warrant strict measures of closing down.
Is still the main source of transmission in the community, in the household. It is from the adults to the child or adult to adult.
Experts argue that even when schools had opened up in a couple of metropolitan cities, there was no big community transmission or big community spike that was seen. In fact, children are not even getting affected in the ongoing third wave, as was being speculated earlier. Also, children do not require to be vaccinated to go back to school. So, low rates of vaccination amongst children is also not a hindrance. In New Delhi, Sneha Mordani for India Today. Not having access to formal education or being in a school has had many other fallouts apart from absence of learning. Child labor and the risk of child exploitation, well, that has gone up. In fact, there have been 490% increase in request for child rescue operations. Also, 9 million additional children are at child labor risk globally. When it comes to access to midday meals and children eating in school, we've had data of approximately 35% of children not having this sort of an access. If you look at the cumulative figures globally, then over 39 billion school meals have been missed globally since the year 2020. Also, there's a big impact on mental health, where 1/3 of primary school students have spoken about having some sort of a mental health issue. Also, half of children going to secondary school have reported mental health issues. And in the middle of all of this, there are parents who've been relentlessly raising the issue of closure of schools, with government authorities talking about why it is important for children to go back to school. And joining us now are parents who've been talking about this. Tanya Agarwal has written several letters to the Delhi government. Thank you, Tanya, for your time. Tanya Kupchandani is also with us. She also is a concerned parent, and so is Simone Khambata. All of you have been worried over the last 2 years or so with these closures that we've seen. I'm going to begin by asking Tanya Agarwal, your representations to the government have not really led to anything, because it does appear that there is this sense that schools perhaps can wait for some more time. Children and online learning can continue for some more time. Tanya.
So we've been writing letters for months. I think the one thing that this particular letter achieved is that it at least got the Delhi government to go public with its support. It took them, 7-8 months to hear us. Now, I don't know, who is deciding that contrary to all scientific evidence that is presented, contrary to how the entire world is acting, contrary to what UNICEF, WHO, and every other country in the world seem to be doing. I don't know who is deciding that in India we must open schools last. And if you look at the last 2 years, I think the answer is barely open them at all. And the thing also is that there is no one to speak for our children, right? They are voiceless, they don't have a vote. And as parents, we just have to organize ourselves more and more over the last few months to make our children's voices heard. I mean, this is ultimately a question of their constitutional rights. And one poor student even went to the Supreme Court, a few months ago and got unceremoniously thrown out. So, I mean, do tell us what else should we do. So I think, we are at the stage now where at least we have the support of Delhi government. The deputy CM has gone public saying that he is in support of this. It's been 2 long years. So now where is the hold up and what is the reason, Sneha? If somebody tells you the reason, you can have a conversation with them. But this is just a black box. It's just a blanket direction. We will not open. There's no reason offered. And at the same meeting, everything else is open. But that defies all logic and all science because adults bring infection home. Kids are free to go anywhere else they want to go. Sero surveys show that 80 to 90% kids have already got COVID, sitting at home or going anywhere else to school. So what's the reason? What's the hold up?
True, and and the fact is that this isn't just about angry parents, and you're right when you say that many parents don't really have a voice, and we've just put out the very disturbing data and the figures that Sneha has accessed from the Boston Consulting Group report on which quantifies how serious this issue really is. Simone, you've got a young child who I assume will be going to school or is about to go to school. How concerning has this entire transpiration been for someone like you? Because for you, this is an imperative. You need to know and have clarity on what's going to happen with offline classes before your child, gets into the education system.
Right. Thank you, Shiv and Sneha, for having me. And thank you so much for taking on this topic because it's much required. I have 2 kids. My daughter is 2.5 and my son is 4. And as a parent who loves my children immensely, I put science over fear and I want schools to open now. And I'm so grateful that the Maharashtra government heard us. A bunch of mothers were angry and angry for very rightful reasons because our children cannot be used as circuit breakers. Why should a child be used as a circuit breaker and not the adult? Data proves over and over and over again that kids recover the fastest. So what is going on? What is the reason for this unnecessary delay in schools opening, thus resulting in years and years of what could be mental and physical regression for our children? I am truly very grateful that schools have opened. I think that as long as schools, open, follow the SOPs properly, I mean, COVID can happen in the park. It can happen in a wedding. It can happen when a parent comes home from work. My kids tested positive 2.5 weeks ago, and poor things didn't go anywhere. So it was the adults who got it home. So why? There has been no rationality to this whatsoever. You heard the kids speak. Tanya just spoke. And I think we're all on the same page. And for all those parents, because trust me, there are a bunch of the others as well who don't want schools to open. My only thing to you is that it's not mandatory. You have the choice of online schools. So why do you have a problem with the rest of the people who want to choose to go offline? Is something that blows my mind. I don't get it. But I hope the rest of the country follows suit. Our kids need school, and that's it. They need to go to school.
And rest of the world essentially has done it, Shiv. Countries have opened up schools, they followed protocol. Think out of the box, think about how you can keep schools safe, how can you keep the children safe there, social distancing, and various other things. Simple things like placing the desks in such a way that there is a good social distancing. I want to talk to Tanya about that. Tanya Kupchandani, schools outside of India have opened up. In fact, India has really earned the dubious distinction really of having the longest school closures. The national capital is Delhi. In fact, is a city that has had the longest school closure. If you just look at the states individually in the country, what do you think is stopping the Indian government from then prioritizing opening of schools? Why is it in the bottom of the priority list? And why this insistence on vaccination for kids to open up schools when the government itself says it's not required?
So I actually have a different perspective, because Mumbai schools have opened, but they've opened with pretty stringent SOPs. They've opened this week, and my son started school yesterday, but he's literally going 2 days a week for 2 hours and spends more time in the car than in school. And this is after 700 days of being at home, struggling with an online screen, getting logged off every few hours. And both my kids are really shy to begin with. So I'm seeing them actually regressing in terms of their social skills. My daughter, who's 5, doesn't remember being in school. So they're in a really, really a sensitive age, and it's really imperative that they get back to a normal education. I think the government is hesitant. I think a lot of that comes from fear, and also from the fear of being blamed for anything happening. But I think that it should be my child, my choice. If I'm comfortable sending my child to school, then they should be allowed to have a full day of school. For the parents who are not comfortable, they can continue online schooling. All schools, at least the ones that we know, schools should have a hybrid option and continue to put the kids back in school on a regular schedule as well.
And the aspects, Sneha, of alienation, emotional well-being, anxiety, a sense of separation and isolation are things that can't even be quantified.
Absolutely.
Some of the data points that we've put out are scary enough, but what about those things which can never actually have a number attached to it? And that's what we're going to be talking about ahead on the show.
That's right, Shiv. In fact, I'm going to thank all the parents who've joined us. The government, in fact, has gone on to say, Shiv, that when schools do open, children in primary schools are actually the safest and they are the least vulnerable, and schools should actually open for kids, the younger kids essentially, but we see most states doing the opposite of it. So where is the science, and who's looking at the science and who's looking at the facts is the big question here. Thanking all the parents. We'll of course come back to you for more, because this conversation on schools opening is certainly going to continue. Welcome back. You're watching our special broadcast, and we're having a conversation on why it is absolutely necessary for children to go back to schools.
Sneha, we all agree that students have been suffering, but it really becomes scary for each and every one of us when you actually put down the numbers, and that's what I'm going to show you right now. The data points I'm about to tell you are every parent's nightmare. Data point number 1 in this Boston Consulting Group report that truly hits home is that 90% of students in this Boston Consulting Group study have lost the ability in at least one language thanks to almost 2 years of only online classes. Data point number 2, and this is even more disturbing, this 1 year loss in schooling is going to take 9 to 14 years apparently to actually recuperate for each and every child. And probably even worse than that, and this is looking into the future, this 1 year loss of schooling could result in 9% less earnings. I told you, the data is disturbing.
Parents in India have been batting for opening up of schools, making presentations before government authorities, and also giving examples of how countries outside of India are opening up schools. Medical experts say that it is something that can be done in India as well, and it really is no rocket science.
A growing chorus: open schools now, and open schools with precautions. Many children, parents and experts are calling for bringing back normalcy in the lives of children, albeit with protocols.
1,500 parents have written to the Delhi government and also to the Delhi governor, and in this letter they say that abundance of caution has led to abundance of harm for children given the closures. India has had the longest closures as far as schools are concerned, and Delhi too has been very strict about it. In fact, these parents say that many countries have seen infections more than India, but they've always followed this principle of opening schools right in the beginning and closing them last, and that India also should do the same.
Experts agree and offer solutions on how to go about this. They say the opening of schools does not increase the risk of spread of disease.
Schools should focus upon improving ventilation in school, also on ensuring that teachers follow COVID-appropriate behavior more diligently. It's less important for children to follow COVID-appropriate behavior, but more important for teachers. Governments at all levels, including all state governments, should use the experience which was generated between July to November last year.
Children must be encouraged to have their meals in areas that are well ventilated. The bathrooms must have an exhaust fan. When a person spends even a minute inside a closed space, the air that is breathed out contains aerosols that could contain the virus. Almost all the teachers are vaccinated now, and if anyone is unvaccinated, they must be encouraged to do so.
Globally, the best practice is what has been spelled out in a report by the Boston Global Consultancy. It gives examples of countries that have adopted out-of-the-box measures. Hong Kong arranged desks in single rows, face-to-back setting. Nigeria has separate entry and dispersal gates. Denmark uses outdoor museums for distancing. Germany conducts tests twice a week. Norway has classrooms divided in cohorts and doesn't allow mixing. US is giving booster shots to teachers. UK is providing in-school vaccination for children. But experts say much more needs to be done to help children.
So as children go through this transition, these have to be our two primary areas of focus. Get them on the sports field, get them to enjoy, be happy, and let them mingle with their peers, obviously in a COVID appropriate manner, but get that peer engagement and relationship started, because social communication skills are so important in the developmental years of children.
Given that the WHO too says the infection per se will not vanish and the disease is here to stay, calibrated moves need to be made to create a safe and equitable environment for children to continue learning and having fun. In New Delhi, with Seha Murdani, Bureau Report for India Today.
Well, there is fear, there are concerns about schools opening, but are these fears valid at all? There have been medical experts, vaccinologists, those who've been studying the virus for the longest time, and they say that opening up of schools right now for children is absolutely safe, provided it's done with the right kind of protocol. Dr. Chandrakant Laharia, well-known vaccinologist, epidemiologist, is also now joining us. Thank you so much for your time. You've made representations, Dr. Laharia, before the Delhi government, saying that schools can be open for children. Do tell us what sort of protocol can be followed and how are schools outside of India really doing it? It really isn't any rocket science, isn't it?
So in last 2 years since the start of pandemic, we have developed a lot of scientific understanding which can facilitate school opening really well. What we know that there are a number of things which can be done and which every individual is doing, but we also know that children are protected and children do get infection at the same rate, but they do not develop severe disease. That's why the role of COVID appropriate behavior for children is very different than role for the adults. So what should be done to open school safely? One and most important thing is that improving ventilation in the classroom. So doors and windows can be kept open, or exhaust can be installed in the classroom, and that will be more than enough for the classroom. That's one important thing. Second thing is that mask. While children need to wear mask as much as possible, especially for 5 to 12 years and 12 to 17 years, mask should be worn like adults. But role of mask is very different for the children than adults. Like if a 5 to 12-year-old does not wear mask, it's not a big concern. The reason is simple. Children do not develop severe disease.
that's why they are at lower risk, and when they are lower risk, the protocol for them is very different. Third is, of course, schools need to provide facilities for proper physical distancing and hand washing. But another important thing to remember is that more important for the children, rather, it's more important for the school teachers to follow COVID appropriate behavior and less important for children. And fourth thing which parents should do, which will make school safe, that if your child is not feeling well or has fever or other symptoms, don't send your child to the school, and that will protect other children. So ventilation, physical distancing, appropriate mask wearing, and then parents taking responsibility of sick children, that will make school safe. But in general, even irrespective of whatever, we know from the global evidence that even in all the countries where schools were open, it did not result in increased transmission in those settings. So schools do not alter in the transmission rate. And fifth and final thing I would say, and which is often being taught, that people think that let vaccination of children be completed before school can be opened. What scientifically we know that children do not need to be vaccinated to attend school. Children can attend school whether they are vaccinated or not vaccinated.
Dr. Laharia, in the shadow of all this data, this evidence that has come in not just from here but from outside the country as well, some of the contradictions here over the government saying that children don't need vaccines, and schools saying that we would like to open only once vaccines are available for children. Why has there been so much inertia in the system, unlike in so many other countries, sir?
So what we need to remember, in epidemiology and public health, the context matter a lot. In other countries, they started vaccination much early before they had a second wave. Their age distribution is very different. So for India, we had a severe second wave. We know through Sero survey that there is a high positivity rate. And we also know from scientific evidence that children are at low risk. So India's context and setting is very different. That's one. Second and most important thing is that what we need to remember that children, the vaccines prevent from severe disease, hospitalization and death. And those conditions are really low in children. So what is the benefit of vaccinating children? Very limited. Yes, there is a benefit of vaccinating high-risk children who have pre-existing condition, but to vaccinate healthy children, there is limited benefit. And the point I want to make, which this is a news breaking yesterday only, the point that Denmark has recently decided that children between the age group of 5 to 12 years need not to be vaccinated. They have looked at the scientific evidence. So setting and context in every country is different. Every country is using different vaccine. And for India's context and setting, the vaccination of children is currently do not appear required. Maybe in the future, if there is more evidence, there is a vaccine which is a nasal vaccine, which can reduce in transmission. Those kind of vaccine can be considered. But as of now, healthy children, especially younger than 15, do not need vaccine. The older 15 to 17 which are being vaccinated, parents can get vaccinated, but don't delay school opening because children are getting vaccinated.
Yes, also, Dr. Laharia, I'll just go to our parents also who continue to be with us. But one quick question from you. What is wrong with India's messaging also? Because the government has repeatedly said that the youngest children are at the least risk when it comes to this infection. But when we did see schools open up after the second wave receded, we had secondary schools open. Before the primary schools, what really happened was that the younger kids continued to be at home. This is absolutely lopsided and illogical, isn't it?
So what is wrong with India's school opening decision is that it is not using scientific evidence and epidemiological data. We continue to have emotional arguments and opinion-based decision. What should have been ideally done, and which is being done in many other settings, that 2 years down the lane, we should be looking at the epidemiological data, especially on the risk in the children, disease in the children, and other aspects to arrive on the decision on opening of schools. But in India, the challenge has been that science and evidence has been insufficiently used in many aspects of pandemic response. But unfortunately, the impact of this not using science and following opinion is worst on the children. We know that children are the least risk of disease, but in this pandemic, they are the worst impacted.
Dr. Laharia, continue to stay with us. We're going to dig a little deeper into this very, very important subject. Stay with us. With schools in India closed right through the pandemic, Indian parents have watched with anguish and frustration how several other countries have kept their schools open right through the second and third waves and kept their children safe. What did those countries know that we don't know here? And what are those lessons that we can implement as we demand for schools to be opened right away?
Based on lessons from the past 2 years, many nations have decided to keep schools open with reinforced health and safety protocols. According to a UNESCO survey, Brazil, France, Kazakhstan, Mexico, Palestine, Ukraine are using traffic light monitoring systems that trigger different measures according to levels of infection. Nations like Canada, France, United Kingdom and Italy are also using mass rapid testing for children. Here's a look at how European nations are allowing schools to function with norms in place. After 2 COVID cases, unvaccinated students go into quarantine in Italy. After 3 cases, the whole class quarantines. School staff are pushing for online tutoring, but the government has made it clear that physical classes will continue. In schools in Spain, after 3 cases, an outbreak is declared. No rapid tests are prescribed, only close contacts are tested once, and if they test negative, another test is done after 7 days. The Greek government has decided to adopt a 50% plus 1 rule, which means a class should go into quarantine only if half of the pupils test positive for COVID. In France, there's no national coordination of closing schools. Local authorities take the call, and in most cases, students testing positive must quarantine. Other students can continue attending classes if they test negative. Like France, there's no national steadfast rule in place in Germany. Mandatory rapid tests for students have fallen to 3 times a week in some regions like Berlin, and in parts of Germany like Thuringia, tests are not mandatory. Slovenia has one of the strictest quarantine norms if a case is detected in a class. The entire class is sent to 7 to 10 day quarantine if a single case is detected among children or their teacher, and this is irrespective of their vaccine status. Students undergo rapid tests 3 times a week. In Romania, classes are shifted online for 7 days if 1 case is detected. Students must undergo 2 rapid tests at home every week.
Concerned about children's being kept away from schools, the UNESCO surveyed many nations and found that as opposed to last year, where remote learning was happening in schools in at least 40 nations, this time only about 25 such countries have partially suspended schools. India can certainly learn from the best practices that these countries internationally have deployed to make sure that children return back to offline learning, even as cases are now on a decline in India. Is it time for children to go back to offline learning? With Anil Jaiswal in New Delhi, Milan Sharma for India Today.
And just to get some final comments from our guests on this special show, Nikhil, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, the schools will be open again. In many ways, the damage has been done. But what are you looking forward to most? And what are your biggest concerns as things open up once again?
Firstly, I think I should have mentioned this point earlier. I had to start out with this. I have to commend our teachers. They have been incredibly hardworking and patient. They've gone through so much pain in terms of learning the online medium and getting comfortable with it and dealing with children, addressing their problems. I think, again, their problems also have to be addressed. Now, what I'm most looking forward to, and I think this goes for all children, is, again, seeing my friends again, right? Having deep conversations with them. I hope schools open, and I can't see why not, because taking right precautions, wearing masks, wearing masks in the classroom. In our school, we have hand sanitizers sort of installed everywhere. So I hope schools can open. Like, I think I come from a privileged sort of private school background. I can't imagine how horrible it is for children in rural areas to go through this because they don't have the facilities like we do. I have a laptop. I can go through Zoom. And so I'm lucky in that way. But again, it's my 10th grade. It's a crucial year for me. I need to get good marks. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting that discipline again. Sort of building myself, getting out of my comfort zone. And yes, most certainly
Simone, as a parent, 100% clear that you're looking forward to schools opening again now?
1,000,000%, Shiv. There's no question about it. I was with Tanya rallying all over Instagram for this. In fact, I'm just going to quickly add one thing here. When schools open and when the governments do give the go-ahead, the schools have had 2 years to figure out their SOPs and getting their act in order because they've taken full fee from everyone. So the fact that they are delaying and, opening with 2 days a week and 2 hours, 2 days, none of that is okay. No parent is going to be okay with it as long as schools understand that they're going to have to deal with the wrath of parents if they don't function normally. When I say normally, I mean with COVID appropriate protocols, of course, but that does not mean my child has to go to school twice a week for 2 hours and then come home and do 2 more hours online. No, we want normal functioning schools. We want our kids to lead normal lives, and that's it. That's it.
All right. Tanya, the spotlight now thankfully has been on this issue after 2 years. And the next few days we'll see the final push really, because it does appear that the central government also is now going to take a call on opening up of schools, at least in some way or the other. Tanya.
So I actually think, this might be too little too late in some sense, because I think for many, many kids, the damage has been done. But having said that, I mean, please, my request to, I don't know who is making this decision, but my request to them, if emotion is the key factor here, then please save our kids, respect their rights, and do what the rest of the world is doing, putting schools first, putting kids first, not last.
That's a sobering, but at least it's a positive note to end on. The damage may have been done, Sneha, but we've got no way out. The schools have to open. There's been enough. Our children have been inside enough. One can't even begin to quantify in many ways the emotional damage that has already been done. But everyone's 100% clear that they have to open.
Yes, and schools all over the world, Shiv, have done it. Schools all over the world are the first really to open and the last to close. And that's what the parents, also the children, that's what they want. They want to go back to schools and just have some semblance of normalcy, because the pandemic really isn't going away anywhere, Shiv.
Absolutely.
And we really have to work our way around it, isn't it?
I'd like to thank all of our guests for being with us today. It's taken a lot of bravery by kids and parents for speaking out at a time when there are so many controversial things out there about schools reopening. But we are 100% clear. Open our schools now. Thank you from Sneha and me, and we will continue to put the spotlight on this very important topic. This is about our children. Thanks for watching.